Hey everyone, I'm Anthony. I work in the industry as a union drone op and first AC, and welcome to the show.
Hi everyone, my name is Marco Gutierrez. I'm a Steadicam operator and camera operator in the union as well. We're both here to talk about what's going on in the film industry, mostly in the camera department, but we'll probably hit on a few other topics as well. So how are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing as good as I can be with all this mess that's going on now, trying to stay sane as best I can and keep creating.
I know that. So I'm actually glad you came up with this idea, because it's getting to the point where we're all just kind of sitting around not really doing a whole lot because our jobs obviously involve us being out in the field. So
Yeah, out in the field, around a lot of different people and cramped, small spaces.
right, basically the worst combination of
Yep.
So just to give you guys an idea of what we're trying to do with this show is we're going to hit several topics, including a few headlines. We're going to be talking about gear and some of our experiences, and see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It'll be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, drone stuff, ground camera stuff, new technologies coming out, things we hear in the news, things we may see coming down the pipeline, as far as film is concerned. And if we actually get a pretty big following, we may actually be able to do some like on-set videos or like some live stream videos on set, which I think would be really cool to show the people, the everyday person, how a film set actually runs and how many people you need.
I mean, assuming we're not dealing with NDAs.
Yeah, well, yeah.
There's some things we can't do. It's one of the downsides of being on union shows. We also thought it would be interesting because you and I were talking about this, that in the YouTube world, most of those guys that claim that they do movies or have done, they're not talking about union stuff. And they're certainly not talking about the bigger productions. So we thought this would be kind of a way to get people sort of a look inside that world, which is very different than what YouTubers go through. And certainly the way we use gear is also much different than the way most YouTubers.
Much different.
Much different.
With most YouTubers, I know they will start off as like a one-man band, and they may, as their following grows, they may come to have like a crew, like a small crew, a camera crew or whatever. But when it comes to union productions, everything has its own specific position with a specific person to do that position.
Yeah, exactly. It's very it's very streamlined. It's almost like in some ways, I guess you could say it's like a factory in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Some people even describe it as it's got a bit of a military sort of feel to it sometimes, because
definitely there are a lot of military influences.
Hierarchy. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Me having a military background, Air Force background, I definitely see all of the similarities that came from the military over to the film industry.
Mm-hmm. So let's dive right into this. The first thing we wanted to talk about is Allen Daviau, and this one really hit close to home, because when I was in film school, he came to my class to be our guest professor, and he told us some pretty interesting stories. But he's a really, really good guy, and he and I would imagine somebody at his, especially being a student at the time, I was just imagining a guy like him would never have any interest in students or whatever. But he actually took a look at my work, which like blew me away, and it showed just what kind of person he was. One of my favorite stories that he told, and it's kind of the way I approach lighting nowadays, was when he did the movie Fearless. He was the director of photography for Fearless in 1993, and basically they were in New York in this tiny little apartment, and he's looking around the room going, where the hell am I going to hide lights? And then he's like staring out the window going, I got it. He asked his gaffer to bring in two 18Ks, put them at the bottom of the building that he's on, and then sends a couple of grips up to the roof of the neighboring building and puts the mirrors on the top of the building and shines the 18Ks up to the mirrors and then through the window. He looks at the director's like, you're lit.
You're lit.
Now, and this was a very different time. We're talking about the early 90s. So we didn't have LED lights, or even the Kino flows were,
Well, how high did he say how high the buildings were that he was shooting up to?
Well, this was an apartment building, so it probably would have been about, I don't know, like maybe
3 or 4 floors up.
Well, more than that. It would have been like maybe 7 or 8 stories. So not super tall, but not, I mean, we're not talking about like skyscraper height here.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
But anyway, I really like his approach, and he was also used to talk about just how much he liked using gear in unique ways. When he was talking about Empire of the Sun, for example, he would talk about the crane that they got because this particular crane had just come out, just the thing about those productions on a scale of that big, those big blockbuster movies, is there's a scene where you see the kid running towards a truck, as the British are evacuating, and that shot was shot in China, I believe, if I remember correctly. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember anyway, that was shot on location, and it's his shot looking from the truck's POV to the kid. The reverse shot of the kid running towards the truck with all the people in the truck bed was shot in Los Angeles. I mean, that's the kind of things you can do on these productions.
Yeah, a little bit of movie magic for you.
A little bit of movie magic, yeah, on 2 completely different continents.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just to go over his career a little bit, of course he's probably most famous for E.T. and there was an interview he did with I can't remember his name now. But anyway,
well, for the people, before we get too deep into it, for the people that don't know, explain, I guess, what happened to Allen. Talking about him today.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that. So the union actually put out a really nice a blurb about him, but he was well, he passed away due to complications related to COVID-19, and I think that's why this hits home, especially at this particular point in time, because this isn't, we're all eager to get back to work, but this is a very real thing that affects all of us, including the people we know. I'll read a short clip from what they said, but Allen started his career shooting the early movies of Steven Spielberg, including Amblin. He built an extraordinary body of work that garnered 5 Academy Award nominations and brought him the ASC Lifetime Achievement Award in 2007. He did Empire of the Sun, which I was just talking about, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Color Purple, which I believe is a very underrated film. I actually really like that film. And Avalon and several others. Harry and the Hendersons, Amazing Stories, which we will get to soon, and Twilight Zone, the movie.
Yeah.
So actually, I do want to talk about Amazing Stories really quickly before we go on to our next talking point, but because you were there when they were prepping the new reboot, Amazing Stories.
The reboot of it?
Reboot, yeah.
So,
tell us that
remember,
experience.
Yeah, well, before that, I'll go back to the beginning. I remember as a kid, my mom introduced me to the original Amazing Stories, and I was in utter awe of that show, because to me it was like a um, back in that time, which was like the early to mid '90s. It was like a modern day Twilight Zone, and that's how I saw it, because I grew up watching all the old Twilight Zones in the '50s and the '60s, and I thought it was a more upbeat, more heartfelt version of Twilight Zone. But fast forward 20 so odd, 30 some odd
Yeah,
years now.
almost, yeah, I think we're at 30 years now. It was a while ago.
Yeah. To the reboot of Amazing Stories that they had for Apple TV Plus. I worked at a camera rental house here in Atlanta that provided the gear for that show. And you would think that with a show like Amazing Stories, with a big name attached behind it, Steven Spielberg was going to be EP or one of the EPs for it and all that, that you're like, oh, you got this big name and all these good, cool people. The show is going to be a really smooth running show. Well, it was the exact opposite of that, because it being an anthology show, every episode is different. And every episode was kind of basically like a mini movie, because I think they're an hour or something, hour and some change each. But with that, they wanted to have every episode be different from one another. So they called in, I think, 3 or 4 different DPs to shoot 10 episodes for the season. Well, through the course of filming, that number gradually shrank down to what we have now that's out in the world, which is 5 episodes. And it was really difficult, I would say, just to have everything fall in place with so many different people wanting so many different things. And it's like, well, you can't have this if you have that, and you've got just different personalities, I guess, colliding. And so you would think, like I said, with big names, it's a very easy process to get something done, but not necessarily. Like, not with getting into like detail of stuff, but it was definitely a process, a very stressful process to get that one out the door and filmed. So,
yeah. Yeah, no, just for the people out there that don't know, this is actually a pretty typical a scenario that happens with a lot of productions, because the amount of equipment that each production needs is extraordinary. And so when they start changing little things here and there, it it becomes a little challenging, to say the least.
It snowballs into something a whole lot bigger than it should be. I will say that.
Well, now we can actually start diving into some of these more interesting topics, because, and I'm going to start with you, actually, because as you probably know in the industry, people are always talking about this, about the whole K's thing, or resolution.
Resolution, yeah.
Probably one of the more probably one of the more annoying things that we have to deal with. We got, of course, traditional 2K, and the 8K, which is traditional 2K, 4K, and then 8K, and then the most recent edition, 6K, which my theory here is that manufacturers are just like, okay, so people don't really care about 8K. What about 6?
Like, we don't need it. That's why they don't care about it.
yeah, exactly. I know a lot of YouTubers are like, yeah, man, I gotta shoot with my new 8K camera. It's like, nobody cares.
and honestly, for things like YouTube, like, the only reason I can see you going anywhere past 4K, I mean, I can see 4K now, because I can definitely see a difference between 4K and 1080. I can definitely see a difference between that. But the only reason you have, I think, to go past 4K as if you're projecting on screens that you would have like in drive-in theaters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at some point you have resolution, and if you blow it up big enough, you're going to lose. It's going to be solved at some point on bigger. But that to me is the only reason why you would want to go past 4K for anything. If it's on YouTube, if it's on a phone, because with YouTube, people are usually watching it on their phone, on their iPad, on whatever. Sometimes I watch YouTube on my TV just because I like to have it on my TV most times because I have it as like a actual network. But more often than not, they're looking at it on a phone or an iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And with a screen that size, it just doesn't matter anything past, even from 1080 to 4K, actually. I mean, if you're pixel peaking, you can see the difference between 1080 and 4K, but anything past 4K, you don't need if you're looking at it on a screen that size.
Right. And actually, scientifically speaking, the way that we resolve sharpness is actually due to the contrast between pixels. And so having a higher, less compression, obviously, and which sometimes translates into higher bit rates. It's actually not quite that straightforward. I'm not going to dive into that rabbit hole, but so definitely having better compression codecs, and also the bit depth and color compression. So I don't know how deep you want to go into this, but there's stuff that people talk about, which is 420, 422, 444, and of course 8, 10, and 12-bit color. All make a significantly bigger difference in the final product than the number of pixels you have. In fact, the number of pixels in a lot of ways doesn't even matter half the time. And you couple that.
Okay, well, I will pause you for just 1 second. Color depth is actually for the next show, so we will save.
Okay. So we'll save that for the next one.
We'll save that for the next show. We'll just do resolution right now, and we can deep dive into color depth, because color depth is a topic.
Yeah. I mean that's a science in it. That's a science in itself. So
yeah. So yeah, we'll just stick with resolution and what the most useful application for any given resolution you can have.
Yeah, so I would actually argue in that case that it has more to do with the codecs, because I've noticed that if you watch a broadcast off live air, like not off of cable or even something like YouTube's cable service or anything like that, a streaming type service, if you watch it directly off air, and chances are you're getting very little compression, if any, because it's a very clean source. And then you watch that same broadcast that they might have like a YouTube variant, where they sometimes will broadcast live and then also put little clips online. You'll notice that there's a significant degradation in quality. And both, because it's broadcast here in the US anyway, we're stuck with 1080p for the time being. That's all that you can broadcast on air. It's a little bit different for cable and streaming services. They don't have those limitations. Most of that is, well, don't even get me started on the FCC. It's a problem in itself, especially with people at the helm at the moment. But yeah, that's what we're stuck with for the moment is just 1080p. But even with that, looking at a 1080p that's has very little compression looks amazing. Whereas you look at something that could be shot on 4K with heavy compression, it looks like crap.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like people will get hung up on one piece of the pie, not paying attention to the other pieces, and they put it up on YouTube or they put it out there and they're like, well, why does it look like crap now? I have 4K, it should look amazing. It's that 4K isn't the thing that makes it look amazing. It's just a part of the puzzle.
Right, it's a part of it, and in some ways, it's not even a very critical part. Dynamic range is something I find to be somewhat entertaining because no manufacturer agrees on the scale.
Yeah.
So you have something like an Airy Mini that might say, I can't think of the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm going to say the Airy Mini would say it has 12 stops of latitude, and then Blackmagic will say, well, we have 14 stops of latitude, which means it's better, right? No. Because how Blackmagic measures stops and how Airy measures stops are not the same. And even within a manufacturer's own product line, they might have two cameras, both claiming that they have 12 or 14 stops of latitude, and even among those two products, they're totally different, even though they claim to have the same dynamic range. And that is huge because that's how we see subtlety and detail. Obviously from how well the camera can see in low light to how well it can see in the highlights. I will say that even something like my new iPhone has done a pretty good job of upgrading their camera and their software to take better advantage of the dynamic range. So I think that's really, it's not really the megapixel count. I mean, I don't really care. I think I don't remember what the count is on my iPhone, but I wouldn't care if it was 8 megapixels because it would still look really, really good. And like you were saying, because of the screen I'm looking at it on,
Yeah, it's all gonna look the same. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would say this, for the person that only sees the K's and think, oh, that's what makes the image the best. What the resolution actually means is just how much of the frame you can see at one time. That's honestly all a K represents. It's your box. If you're looking at a screen, that's like, and you can see all the different charts. And let me see if I can pull one up here.
Oh, actually, I got an interesting addendum to that we'll have to talk about this on the next show. I'll have a graphic made for you. But it turns out that there is that the scale from going from, let's say, standard definition to high definition to 4K and to 8K, it's a logarithmic curve. So you get a problem with diminishing returns. In other words, you're putting a lot more processing power into it because you got a lot more pixels, but you're actually not getting, you're not really getting more resolution. And that sounds weird because it's like, wait. Like you might get 3 times the magnification possible on going from standard definition to high definition, and only like 1.5 times going from 4K to 8K. And it keeps dropping down even more and more. So as you get into 16K and whatever, it's actually one of the advantages that people say happens with high resolutions is that you can crop in. And first of all, coming from a camera operator point of view, I don't know how you feel, but I'm just like, if your composition is that bad, that's what you're worried about.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. I found one, and it's up on the screen now. And so, yeah, see, all of it, it's just how much of that image you see at one time. So that basically has very little to do with the quality of the image. It's just how much of the image you can see. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. No, no, you're absolutely right. It's one of those topics that's really annoying to deal with because it usually just makes more work for the post-production people and even downloading the media itself. So,
yep.
4K,
and they're like massive files that. Yeah.
Right, and also if you're concerned about like, oh well, we can get better green screen out of it, I was just like, if that's the case, you're lighting the green screen wrong. I'm just saying. Even when I was shooting in 2K or even standard definition for that matter, I've never had a green screen problem. You know, you light it right, it's going to look amazing. So,
Yeah.
visual effects, I would say the same thing too. In fact, if we go back to some of the early CGI movies like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, those were 2K. Those are not done 4K or 6K or 8K, and they, you know, go back, take a look at them. They look amazing. They didn't need all that extra resolution.
And that's just, like I said, another topic for another discussion. But yeah, it's just the tools don't necessarily make the product. It's how you use the tools, which is what determines how good your product is.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
But yeah. But so with that being said, we'll jump into when is the best time to use 4K, 6K, 8K. I don't even know why we're talking about 8K right now, but yeah. So Marco, so when would you think? I guess. Well, like I said, with 4K now, I can see a use for that. You can. I mean, our phones can shoot 4K now, which is amazing to me. So I do see a definite difference from 4K, from 1080 to 4K. But still, I don't think if it's not being, like I said, projected on anything bigger than a phone or a laptop or an iPad screen, you can stay 1080, honestly. And it'll still look just as good.
In fact, I have a 4K television that I just recently bought, and when I use it at 1080p, I can't, at the distance that I'm viewing the television, I can't tell the difference. I do have a projector that projects, I think it's a 90, 98, somewhere between 98 and 100 inch projection. On that one, you can start to see a difference. It's very subtle though. But even on a projection that size, you can't really see that much of a difference. And if that's what you're paying attention to, then you're watching something that's probably not that interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
If we're really being honest.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, so wait a minute. Let the people know about your recent discovery, since you've just gotten the new Apple TV 4K with HDR capabilities.
That's right.
Let everyone know the crazy discovery you found that you don't know why it's in like HDR. The film that you're talking about, you don't know why it's in 4K HDR.
So we'll talk more about this on the next episode. But HDR, of course, is high dynamic range, which generally means you got instead of the traditional 16.8 million colors, you now have 10.7 billion colors, and you also have much brighter. The screen itself is much brighter and much darker, so it's a whole package. But anyway. There's several standards out there. There's HDR10, HDR10 Plus, HDL, Technicolor, and Dolby Vision, which is probably one of the best current standards on the market. I found out recently, as I was scrolling through Netflix, that Tiger King is being shown in Dolby Vision HDR. Why?
I don't know why, but it is.
Oh my God! I mean, yeah, it's like if you're gonna watch something with a big spectacle, or like a good movie like Close Encounters, or even Infinity Wars, depending on what your taste in movies is, I can totally get that. But Tiger King, why?
Don't know why. Don't know why.
And I do have to thank you for talking me into getting the Apple TV. The only Apple device I have currently is my iPhone, and I needed something for my new projector to get the HDR working on it. And it turns out that Apple TV is a pretty good way of doing it. I even found out that the little remote that it comes with will control my amplifier volume as well. So,
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
they thought of everything, but for some reason, it took the my AirPods from my phone and connected it to the Apple TV, which I was just like, no. I don't even know why they connected to that in the first place, but everything else was fine until that moment. I'm just like, why can't I hear anything? And it's
coming out of your AirPods.
Coming out of the AirPods, I was like, it's not what I wanted.
Okay. So we see the uses, or the use case for 1080, the use case for 4K. Is there a use case for 6K or 8K right now?
I don't really know about 8K. What I'll say about 6K, and one of the
here's what I found. What? Yeah, there's Siri for you.
We're not talking to you, Siri. One of the things that's being done with 6K at the moment is Sony. I don't know about Red at the moment, but Sony is using the large format sensors, the 3.2 sensors, to shoot 6K. And when you scale down to 4K, it crops down to a perfect Super 35 image area. And in that scenario, I think it's actually pretty good because, the majority of the work we do is going to be Super 35 4K. So that works out. And then you have the 6K resolution when you need to shoot large format if there's some particular reason why you want to do it. At some point, we'll go down the depth of field rabbit hole. But I know we'll
definitely get to that.
Yeah. So there's a big trend moving towards large format sensors, which is I think it's a very misunderstood topic as to what that actually means and what you can actually do with it, because some people confuse resolution with sensor size. The two aren't, like, you can have a 6K large format sensor like the Sony Venice or the what was it, the Alexa 65, which are both large format 6K cameras. Or you can have a Red 8K Super 35 camera. And if you're worried about, all that extra space that you get, you're not going to get that with the sensor. You're going to get that with, resolution. So an 8K Red with a Super 35 sensor is going to be more beneficial to you than a 6K sensor that just happens to be large format. But anyway, like I said, that's a rabbit hole in itself. So to answer your question, I actually think that 6K is really it's sort of a specialty need kind of thing. And I think both Arri and Sony kind of got it right. I know that Red has been introducing some 6K variants as well. And if you have a need to do something in 6K for whatever reason, then, I can understand that. 8K honestly just doesn't make any sense. The size of the screen that you would have to use, and the distance at which you'd have to be from that screen to make 8K make sense makes it just superfluous at best. It's just not. It's not necessary. It might be cool to say, or and if you're a really bad camera operator and have to reframe your image all the time.
Well, the thing with that was, because that was one of the big arguments that everyone had when 4K first came out. It's like, well, I can reframe. I can just shoot one shot, and then I got my wide, my close-ups, my inserts. It's like, yes, you can reframe, but with every reframe different shot, it's still the same angle. So it's still going to look like the exact same shot, just zoomed in. Which, to me, if you're going to have a different shot from a wide to two mediums, a close-up, and insert, all of those need to be different angles. My understanding from how I shoot, they're going to all be different angles.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I totally agree. It's I mean, it's kind of a weird gimmicky thing that you do if you're on a budget and you don't have the uh, you know the setup for that. I did recently I did a show for National Geographic where we had 3 Sony Venice cameras, and uh, they were all aimed. One of them had a wide shot, one of them had a moving shot on a slider, and the other one had a close up. So between the 3 cameras, the client, was looking at our footage as we were shooting it, and their jaw was on the ground, but the cameras weren't, in the same place. Had we done that with one camera, we wouldn't have gotten that reaction. So. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, different shots require different angles. You don't want to shoot your close up the way you shoot your wide shot.
Exactly. And that'll be another topic we get into about framing and how you move your camera through space and how to get those like cinematic looking shots.
Oh yeah. At some point we'll get into the YouTuber's idea of the word cinematic. That's a rabbit hole in itself.
Oh yeah. Okay, well I think we've covered pretty much everything we wanted to get with this show. So I mean, you got any last, well, not last words, any
last thoughts for today.
Last thoughts or whatever. Yeah.
So like I said, we're trying this out, and we hope to hear what people's feedback is, and any topics you'd like us to talk about. We will be doing reviews, whenever this whole thing is over. And
definitely.
Yeah, because we've been talking to a couple of manufacturers about some of their new products that are coming up, so we're pretty excited about that as well. Let us know in the comments things you'd like to hear us talk about, things you're interested in, and
I would just say like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest content. Like I said, this is the first show. We've got a couple in the pipeline that we're going to be knocking out here, while all we have is this for the foreseeable future. That's none of us are working right now. We're, like I said, just trying to still be creative and keep those creative juices flowing. So we just figured we'd try this out and see how it goes.
Yeah. So stay safe, stay home. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah. All right. See you in the next episode.